Hello and welcome to my channel. The title of this video is A Basic Study of Lord Surya in the Vedas. Introduction. Quote, "His corsairs bear on high the divine all-knowing sun, that he may be seen by all worlds. At the approach of the all-illuminating sun, the constellations depart with the night like thieves. You traverse the vast ethereal space, measuring day and night and contemplating all that have birth. Divine and light-diffusing Surya, your 7 corsairs bear you, bright-haired, in your car." Unquote. The importance of the symbol of the sun. The sun is the visible source of life for the planet Earth. All life on the Earth and whatever else may exist, even microscopically, in the solar system, depends absolutely upon the sun for its existence. It is thus a powerful symbol of the divine in many cultures. Even in the strict monotheism of the Bible, in which the sun is a created object to regulate time, its symbolic influence is still felt in the Book of Psalms, and God is described in terms of the sunrise in the vision of the prophet Malachi. The seers of the Aryan 5 tribes identified the visible sun with Lord Surya, whom they eulogized as a Deva among the Devas, the light that is most excellent. From the ancient times of the Vedic culture through to modern Hinduism, the sun has always played an important role in the Aryan civilizations of the subcontinent. One of the most important mantras which are recited daily by Orthodox Brahmins is the Gayatri mantra, which is offered to the transcendent light of the sun. There is still a minority path in Hinduism, the Saura sect, of those who worship Lord Surya as the Supreme Lord. This was much more prominent in the Middle Ages. In the Upanishads, the sun is primarily a representative of Atman, or the location of Brahmaloka. The Puranic literature provides a much wider range of legends and details about Lord Surya and the solar realm than are found in the actual Vedas Samhitas, though a number of hymns are dedicated to some form of the sun. However, many of the roots of these views of the sages from the Upanishads and writers of tales in the Puranas may be traced to the older text, even if only in passing allusions. The sun has long been important in Vedic astrology, of course, and just as for disclosure, my own sun is exalted in 12 degrees of Aries in conjunction with Moon and Mercury. I wish to point out, as always, that this should be considered a basic and not an exhaustive study. There is certainly more to say and much discussion of these matters beyond what I have in this study. I am merely sharing the state of my research as it stands. It is to be hoped that this will motivate the viewer to pursue these subjects independently. Method of textual analysis, triplification. The method I will be using to analyze the subject of Surya in the Vedas is called by me triplification. When one takes a term in the Vedas, such as Agni, for example, and studies the mantras consistently, one finds that the term is used generally in 3 different ways, which are determined by context. Thus, there is the celestial Lord Agni, who is the Deva, the terrestrial Agni, which is fire, most often associated with the fire of sacrifice. These are Agni in the macrocosm, but there is another form of Agni in the microcosm, which is the yogic Agni, which is related to the life force or the prana in man. In this study, there is the celestial Deva, Lord Surya. There is the visible sun in the terrestrial realm. And finally, there is the microcosmic sun, which shines in the heart. The celestial Deva, Lord Surya. Genealogy of Lord Surya. Lord Surya was nobly born and is considered to be an Aditya. This places him at the apex of the celestial hierarchy of Devas, who are responsible for the management of this holographic universe. As this study will show, he plays a key role in this process. There are alternative views on the origin of the sun, at least so far as the paternity is concerned. However, the mother of the sun is none other than the goddess Aditya, and no other mother is ever mentioned for him. An ambiguous verse refers to the sun as the infant progeny of Mitra and Varuna. In the last book of the Atharva Veda, which is focused upon exalting Lord Indra as the Supreme Lord, it is said that he begat the sun and that he raised it aloft. If the origin of Lord Surya were with Lord Varuna or the Azur-Chind king of Devas, he would still be classed as an Aditya. And we must recall that these may also be referring to different aspects of the sun. But there's one verse which attributes a different origin to the sun. In this verse from the Rig Veda, Lord Surya is the son of Savasva. Indra, quote, Indra has defended the pious sacrifice Etasha, who contending with Surya, the son of Savasva, unquote. In the later legend associated with this verse, King Savasva worshipped Lord Surya for a son, and the son took birth as his son himself. Later, the avatar of the sun had a dispute with the seer Etasha, in which Lord Indra intervened. Thus, this verse is not a reference to the Deva or the visible sun itself. Yet another father is Dahatar, who is said to have created the sun as well as the moon. This is a fairly uncommon name in the Vedas, which is a generic reference to the function of the creator. A mantra in the Yajur Veda says he created all these worlds. In the later hymns of the Atharva Veda, he is only said to uphold the sun. Soma Pavamana is also attributed with the generation of the sun. Quote, father of Agni, Surya's generator, the father who begot Indra and Vishnu, unquote. The third Veda provides a verse which alludes to the birthplace of Surya. It is clear then in the Vedic view that both the visible sun and the Deva had an origin at a point in time. One way to approach these contradictory verses is to ask if they are all speaking of the same subject. The sun is identified with a wide variety of devas in the Vedas. For example, with Soma, Agni, Prajapati, Indra, and Vishnu. Thus, these variations are not necessarily all speaking about the same entity or object. Soma Pavamana, for example, as the source of the Devas, is speaking of their root in consciousness, while the Dahatar should be read as a lower level of activity of the manifestation of creation. It is also not uncommon in Vedic literature to fabricate the different versions of legends to express a different purpose. The daughter of the sun and the Ashvins Kumars. In only one mantra is Lord Surya said to have two wives who know their way and are rich in light. but he does have a daughter also called Surya. She is married to the divine twins, the Ashvin Kumars. They are described as her groomsmen. She travels with the Ashvins in their single triangular car. The hymns of the Vedas do not provide a description of this goddess, and there are no offerings which are given to her specifically. The sages say her lovely dress was adorned with gatha when she was married. However, she is poetically connected with the filtering process of the Soma brew. Once the ephedra plant was crushed and mixed with water, it was poured over a wool filter to remove any pieces of the stalks or other impurities. This imagery is associated with the daughter of the sun. Quote, "The daughter of the sun purifies your, Soma, gushing streams through the eternal outstretched hair." Unquote. One reason for this is that the streams of Soma are compared to the rays of the sun. In an alternative version in the Rig Veda, the daughter of the sun is said to be married to Lord Agni, or some manifestation thereof, and was given to him by the sun in his form of Gandharva. In the Atharva Veda, it is the form of Savita who bestows his willing Surya on her lord. Pardon me while I take a drink of my raw milk. It is quite hot today in the Bay Area. General description of Lord Surya. As an Aditya, Lord Surya would be naturally self-resplendent and have an aristocratic appearance or be opulent, as the Adityas are all consistently described by the seers when they appeared in the hall of sacrifice in response to the rituals of the Brahmins. As one might expect, the dominant imagery associated with him is described in the hymns as that of light and gold. In accordance with his status as an Aditya, Lord Surya was perceived to have a chariot and horses. The chariot is described as golden and is said to have one wheel. This wheel would have been viewed by the sages as the visible sun. The 7 bay steeds of Lord Surya, which feature in modern Hindu art, are already present in the Rig Veda. They are described with various colors. They were seen as variously white, which is the most common in most verses, and in a single verse they're described as bay-colored and in another as red-rayed. They are also called swift. Upon his chariot, Lord Surya moves at the speed of thought. All of them are mares, representing a feminine element associated with Lord Surya. Only one horse is clearly named in the Vedas, and this is Etasha. These steeds are identified by the sages with the rays of the sun as well. Quote, "You have yoked to your chariot 7 types of purifying rays, O sun." Unquote. In the Atharva Veda, these 7 bright beams are mentioned. These 7 horses in their forms as rays are called intelligent sisters and are said to grant intelligence. They are also not only grant healing and intelligence, but are purifying as well and invoked in one hymn to make us free from shame. Epitaphs and forms of Lord Surya. It is common in the Vedic hymns for a deva to have a variety of names and titles which reflect different aspects of their activities. It should be borne in mind that as beings of energy and consciousness, the Devas are not locked into a single form like material creatures, and their appearance alters based upon their activities. The sun is no exception to this rule. In fact, one verse suggests that the sun may have a variety of names reflecting his location in the sky. Quote, 7 are the quarters of the world with different suns. 7 are the ministrant priest. 7 are the divine Adityas. With these, Soma, protect us. Unquote. Pardon me. While it is possible from the names given to Surya through the Vedas to construct a model in which this fits, because some of these names have little to no information specifically defining their location or activity, it would be difficult from the text of the Vedas Samhitas alone to fully validate the various possibilities for this model. So I'm not going to go into that right now. Savita, or Savita. One of the most common names associated with the sun throughout all the Vedas is Savita. This form of the sun is given the epithets of golden-handed and golden-tongued, which are frequently repeated throughout all the Vedas, and with only one exception are associated exclusively with Savita. He is often called the impeller. He is described as possessing an ornamented golden chariot with 2 white horses, and in these same verses is said to rouse mortals. This is probably due to the time of his appearance. He also bears a golden spade in this form and is adorned with golden chainmail, indicating a martial function. The sages of the Rig and Sama Vedas refer to rites offered to him at dawn. There's further evidence which links Savita to the rising sun. It is said the sun shines downward, but Savita is described as shining upwards. In the Yajurveda, this is described further, quote, Savita, with your top you touch the sky, have your middle filled the air, and steadied with you have the earth, unquote. Specific roles are assigned to him. One title for him is Lord of Wealth. It is he who is responsible for dispelling bad dreams, perhaps because he brings the light of dawn. Along these same lines, he is often called upon for protection. He is said to dispel Rakshasas. Quote, hence, Vayu, Savita, drive evil action, chase Simida away, drive off the demons. Ye give us store of energy and power, deliver us, ye twain, from grief and trouble. Unquote. Another function which is mainly attributed to Savita is association with the sun in the forgiveness of sin. Many devas in the Vedas forgive sin, and the sun itself is able to perform this function. However, this is predominantly an attribute of Savita. The sages express gratitude that they are, quote, sinless in the sight of Aditi through Savita Deva's influence, unquote. This is one aspect of a broader function, which is purification. In the mantras of the Yajurveda, he is called upon to purify the sacrificer, as well as a variety of the ritual implements which are listed in specific mantras. Savita is also attributed with the role of creator, and is praised in the later Vedas as the great architect of the universe, the wise sage who, golden-handed, measured the sky with skillful design, and who fixed earth with hands to bind it. He is also honored as the sustainer of heaven. Called elsewhere the sapient Asura, he is praised in some hymns as the sapient one who arrays himself in all forms. While Savita is in many verses clearly the rising sun, this does not explain all the mantras in which he is invoked. In the oldest section of the first Veda, he is said to give blessings 3 times a day, which implies his presence beyond simply the first stage of the sun at dawn. In the same Veda, Lord Savita is also said to be in each of the directions, including north, where the sun does not pass. In a poem in the later Atharva Veda praising him, a verse within the hymn itself directs that he should be offered sacrifice at twilight. In yet another verse, he is said to precede both day and night. He is also associated with the vault of heaven, which would be the sun at its zenith, not the sun at dawn. It would appear this name is applied more widely than simply the rising sun. In several hymns, he is presented as distinct from the sun. One is that Savita is described as possessing a chariot with 2 white horses, as we said, while Surya's is always visualized having 7 horses with various descriptions of colors. This, however, could be rationalized as simply different forms of the sun, but there are more distinctions. While imagery associated with Lord Surya is frequently blended with that of the visible sun, this is rarely the case for Savita by name, with 2 exceptions in all the mantras of the 4 Vedas. But there are verses which are beyond mere inference of distinctions where this separation is clearly expressed. Quote, "Either you traverse, Savita, the 3 regions, or combine with rays of Surya, or you pass between the night on one hand, or you, divine Savita, are Mitra through your benevolent functions." Unquote. This is found elsewhere as well. Savita is described as being purified with the rays of Surya, and it is Savita who declares to the sun in the Atharva Veda that we are sinless. Not only is Savita able to forgive sin, but he punishes for it, and we find that he directs Lord Varuna as to whom is to suffer from his much dreaded fetters, and who is to be given over to destruction. This behavior is only associated with Savita and not with Lord Surya. A final point of distinction is that the sun is described as Savita's strong-pinioned eagle. The question then becomes, who might be this other form of Savita? In one verse, he is linked with Lord Indra, according to Siana on this verse. However, it would appear there is a strong and consistent connection to Lord Vishnu. One reason for this is that he alone is given an epitaph which is unique to Savita, golden-handed, in a hymn dedicated to him in the Sama Veda. Quote, "I praise this Deva, parent of heaven and earth, exceedingly wise, possessed of energy, giver of treasures, whose splendor is sublime, whose light shone brilliant in creation, and who, wise and golden-handed, in his beauty made the sky." Unquote. Another reason is that as Lord Vishnu is the cosmic order in the Vedas, it is one of his functions to enforce this order, which is done through Lord Varuna. We see this expressed in Savita's function related to concerns with sin, forgiveness, and punishment. It is said of Savita, his laws are constant, while the sun, as the metaphoric eye, is omniscient. It is nowhere associated specifically with law or rita, which would be dharma in later Sanskrit. This is the purview of Lord Vishnu. There is another link between Savita and the cosmic order. In the same manner as Lord Vishnu, who is perceived in his cosmic form as set in the spheres of the world and the force driving them, Savita is portrayed in the same manner, and this is unique to just the two of them. Quote, "Savita, encompassing by his magnitude, pervades the three divisions of the firmament, the three worlds, the three brilliant spheres, the three heavens, the threefold earth. May he, by his three functions, for his own pleasure, protect us." Unquote. Finally, in describing the sun as Savita's flying mount, this may be a foreshadowing of the later image in the Puranas in which Lord Vishnu is mounted upon Garuda. Rohita. The name Rohita means the red one, and may refer to the form of the sun as it is just above the horizon and assumes a red hue. The hymns of Book or Kanda 13 of the Atharva Veda are dedicated to this form of the sun. Rohita is described as a bull whose horns are sharply pointed, and also in association with the image of the horse is called the speckled leader, whose consorts are mares accompanied by Gandharvas. These are etheric species often associated with the middle atmosphere, which lends further credence to the idea that this may be a form of the sun in the lower sky. One reason to conclude this may refer to the setting sun is that we are told of him, having been reborn, he returns to his birthplace and goes into the womb of the earth. But another description given of him is as a golden-winged swan, specifically referring to the opposite direction. Quote, "The golden-hued hamsas, or swan's wings, soaring to heaven, spread over 1,000 days' continual journey, supporting all the devas, beholding every creature." Unquote. In harmony with this description, he is said to be erect and reached the welkin, which is a rather archaic English word for the sky or the atmosphere. Given the reference to the movement in opposite directions, it is reasonable to conclude that this refers to the lower sun near the horizon, both at the beginning and the end of the day. The sun in this form is identified as the Supreme Lord and Creator who made the earth his altar and created Soma, water, and cattle. Regarding this, the sages say in these verses, quote, "The Ruddy One, Rohita, made firm heaven and earth. By him the firmament, by him the atmosphere, the spaces were measured out." By him the Devas discovered immortality, unquote. In a later verse in this book, we are told, quote, the Ruddy One became time. The Ruddy One in the beginning was Prajapati. The Ruddy One became the world, unquote. A final point is that Rohita, like Savita, is presented as distinct from the sun. This may refer to the visible sun as the vehicle for this form of Lord Surya, or may indicate identification with another Deva. He is called superior to Agni and Surya. However, unlike Savita, if this is a reference to a separate Deva, it is unclear who this may be in the text. Lesser names. There are names of the sun which appear in the hymns on few occasions and whose exact meaning in these contexts is not readily apparent. We have already seen the name Sidrya. Another unique name is Vasuvit. In one verse, the sun, here associated with Lord Indra, is called Surya, and in this form his chariot is drawn by 4 yellow horses. Gandharva is another name for the sun in the waters, specifically. Disputed names. There are some names for the sun which are disputed among various scholars as to whether they are actually names of the sun or other paraphernalia associated with Lord Surya. Tarkshya. One name which appears in 2 verses is Tarkshya. According to Dalal in the Vedas and Introduction, this is not the sun itself, but is one of the divine horses. He claims this horse became transformed into Garuda over time in the later Puranas. Dakshina. The name Dakshina is invoked several times in the Rig Veda and appears to have a solar connection. One hymn describes great light from the spacious path of Dakshina. In another, a hymn offered to the sun, the Devas are said to ascend onto Dakshina's broad chariot. As the word means south, it would be reasonable to conclude that this is a form of the sun as it moves along a southern path and is associated with the southern fire of Vedic sacrifice. However, the opinion of the scholast here is that Dakshina is actually the name for the daughter of Prajapati and not a form of the sun. General activities and boons of Lord Surya. Rulership over the human realm. Quote, the 7 gliding steeds convey the sun, the lord of every individual moving or stationary thing, traverses the whole world in his chariot for the good of all, unquote. There are a handful of verses in the Vedas which describe Lord Surya as the Supreme Lord and Creator and created. It is also said, this is the Godhead, this is the might of Surya. The activity of the sun in creation is outlined in other verses which portray him in a secondary role. Quote, first was the Deva engendered, Vishwakarma, then the Gandharva sprang to life. Third is succession was the plant's begatter, he laid the water's germ in many places, unquote. While some sages worshipped the sun as their chosen god, it would appear they were a minority. In the era of the Vedas Samhitas themselves, Lord Indra was adored as Supreme Lord by the majority of the seers. The preponderance of verses which speak of administrative associations with Lord Surya place him as the ruler of the human realm. We might think of him more as a governor than a king. The vehicle of this manifesting into the material realm is the visible sun, so this will also be considered in this section of the study. In an incantation in the Atharva Veda to retrieve the spirit of a dying man, to keep him alive, we read, quote, "Homage to death, the ender. May thy breathings inward and outward still remain with thee. Here stay this man united with his spirit in the sun's realm." So this world is the sun's realm. The sun is the soul of all that moves. He is also given the title of herdsman and called the germ of the Devas, the father of hymns and all living creatures' Lord. Along these lines, the sun knows the births of the Devas and the acts of men, which reflects not only an administrative role, but omniscience within his sphere of activity. There is a fundamental reason as to why the sun holds this position. Agni is associated with the sun as both the fire of light and prana. It is said by the sages, Agni spreads the light of the sun. Pardon me. In the Yajurveda, in a rather esoteric mantra, which states that the eye and pupil of Surya is set in Agni. In the Atharva Veda, prana is even more closely associated with the sun. Prana is Deshtri and Viraj Prana is reverenced by all. He is the sun, he is the moon. Prana is called Prajapati, unquote. Further, as the soul of all that lives, it means that the sun is the source for all the prana which flows into the solar system. This is why Lord Surya has the role of governor and is given the epitaph of life-bestowing. In the third Veda, there is a metaphor used to encapsulate this prana by identifying it with serpents. This is one of the dominant motifs of Hindu art, and the reason Devas and Sitas are often portrayed with snakes to represent their prana. Quote, "Homage be paid to serpents, unto all of them that are on earth. To those that dwell in the air, to those that dwell in the sky be homage. To those that are the demon's darts, to those that live upon the trees, to all serpents that lie low and whole, be adoration praised. Or to those that are in heaven's bright sphere, or to those who dwell in the sun's beams, serpents whose home has been prepared in waters, homage unto them." Unquote. It should be understood that these serpents are distinct from the Nagas who are discussed in later literature. The reason for this is that the Nagas are chthonic and thus cannot be linked with the atmosphere or solar realm. Also, as an aside, the enemies of the Nagas are Garuda and all of his people, which are flying solar entities. Lord Surya's omniscience through the medium of the visible sun is thus explained. He is literally linked to all the movement of prana which flows from him. This omniscience brings us to one of the key images associated with the sun. One explanation for the reason of a variety of devas are identified with the sun, and there are a number of forms of it, is that these entities identified with it and are not separate suns in a literal sense, but they are like the sun as powerful sources of prana, or specific functions of that prana as a specific task within this holographic universe. The eye of Lord Surya. Quote, "The pure eye of the universe, beneficial of the devas, rises. May we behold it for 100 years." Unquote. The visible sun is seen not only as a wheel, but as an eye in the poetry of the seers. In one of the most famous creation hymns in the Rig Veda, the Purusha hymn, the sun is a manifestation of one of the eyes of Purusha as he sacrificed himself to create from himself. The sun described as an eye is quite common in a variety of cultures. It symbolically represents omniscience rather than a literal function of the visible sun. Thus, hiding underground won't help, as one Luciferian movement and the Middle Ages in Europe thought. As the ruler of this realm, Lord Surya is observant of the activities of man and other etheric species which may be under his jurisdiction or cross into his zone. As mentioned, the sun knows the acts of men, and beyond humans also all that lives. This image is shared with Lord Varuna. The reason for this is simple. Lord Varuna is the deva who acts upon the intelligence supplied by Lord Surya through astrological means. General boons of Lord Surya. The seers of the Vedas called Lord Surya their friend. This is because he provided to them a variety of boons in their lives of both a spiritual and a material nature. While not invoked as frequently as Lord Indra, his grace was still sought by the sages in a number of hymns, and he was important within the Vedic religion. Healing. The blessing most commonly sought from Lord Surya in the Vedas is that of healing. Interestingly, this request is expressed in only 2 verses of the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda, and 2 references in the first mandala specifically to poison, while with the vast majority being found in the Atharva Veda. The Rig Veda is chronologically divided into 2 sections. These are the family books of mandalas 2 through 7, and the other mandalas 1 and 8 through 10, which are considered to be later. In one of the verses in the first Veda, the sages prayed, quote, "Radiant with benevolent light, rising today and mounting into the highest heaven, do you, O sun, remove sickness from my heart and yellowness from my body. Let us transfer the yellowness of my body to the parrots, to the starlings, or to the Haritala, I believe is, tree." Unquote. Some might see this as an indication of an historical development in the Vedic cosmology of the role of the sun. Were this strictly the case, it might be expected that some increase of mantras on this subject could be tracked through the Sama and Yajur Vedas as well, but they are absent. While it is possible, most likely the reason for the greater presence of the mantras in the Atharva Veda can be found in the more utilitarian nature of that work. It is far less focused on sacrificial mantras and more on other aspects of life. The historically later mantras found recorded in the Atharva Veda, where it is said the sun is endowed with 100 powers, are also much more specific. Lord Surya, acting through the medium of the visible sun, is addressed to resolve a whole host of illnesses for both man and cattle. Because vision is closely associated with light and thus the sun, the most frequent mantras are to seek healing for vision-related issues. Some of the other medical issues addressed are diseases in general, worms in cattle, which it destroys with his beams, jaundice, sexual potency, poison, and cough are all specifically healed by the sun's rays. From a modern perspective, it may be asked, what is the idea behind such petitions? Was it simply magical thinking, or was there some theoretical basis for the beliefs of the sages that these chanted verses could assist anyone? The answer to this is found in the classical belief in prana called qi in Chinese medicine. By affecting the pranic flow in the body, the inner yogic Agni, it is affecting the well-being of the body and assisting its own healing mechanisms. We see the rays of the visible sun have an association with prana and are in fact the source of it, and thus it's quite natural that the sages would appeal to Lord Surya in this context. Wealth. Quote, "We solicit today the divine sun, his favor being propitiated, that wealth which is desirable, benignant heaven and earth, bestow upon us riches consisting of habitation and hundreds of cattle." Unquote. And of course, in the Vedic era, cattle were the measure of wealth. Another boon which the sages sought for their patrons and communities from Lord Surya was wealth. While this at rare times are asked generally of Lord Surya, in the overwhelming majority this boon is sought specifically from Lord Savita. It is he who is hailed as the Lord of Wealth and a Deva whom those solicitations of wealth mutually worship. The sages prayed to his assistance to flee poverty. There are a variety of such mantras throughout the Vedas. This plays into the possible double meaning of Savita. If he is understood as the rising sun, then the association with Lady Usas as dawn would account for this particular boon. Cattle are often regarded in the Rig Veda as the measure of wealth, and the dawn has strong associations with cattle. But Lord Vishnu was also petitioned, by the sages for wealth, as he is given epithets such as liberal and the showerer of benefits. Protection. A common boon sought from a variety of devas is protection. This was sought from Lord Surya in all his forms. Most mantras, however, with this request are specifically addressed to Savita once again. In fact, the ratio is 13 to 8. I calculated this. In the Rig Veda, only one such petition is addressed to Lord Surya by name, while 5 others are offered to Lord Savita. Quote, "May the stone be uplifted, Devas, when I make the libation. dispersing all my secret adversaries. The Deva Savita is our adorable protector." Unquote. There is a similar ratio in the other Vedas. We find in the hymns of the Samaveda that Savita particularly imbues warriors with energy to protect the tribes. In the Yajurveda, Lord Surya is said to give protection from the east, alluding to the sun itself, and Lord Surya, or Lord Savita, anoints with balm for protection. There are a number of invocations in the Atharva Veda calling upon him for this aid as well. Quote, "Let the fiends steal the poison of the cattle. May Aditi cast off the evildoers. May Savita Deva give them up to ruin, and be their share of herbs and plants denied them." Unquote. The petitions to Lord Surya are more frequent in the fourth Veda than in any other. One notable prayer is that Lord Surya is called upon for protection from snakes. Perhaps the reason for this is that he is credited with the ability to heal from poisons. He is also called the foe-destroying sun. The Vedic sacrifices to Lord Surya. Lord Surya receives a variety of offerings from the Brahmins which are recorded in the Vedas. Beginning with the Rig Veda, we find it mentioned that Soma was offered to Lord Surya. It is also stated that the sacred horse of the horse sacrifice goes to the sun. But this does not mean that it was specifically offered to Lord Surya. The sages also advise to worship Lord Savita with the bloodless sacrifice of hymns. In his capacity as an absolver of sin, the first day of a longer ceremony for expiation is dedicated to him. In this form of Savita, a cup of Soma is offered to the sun. Perhaps the most frequently repeated mantra used in a wide variety of sacrifices found in the Yajurveda begins with an invocation of Lord Savita as the impeller because he speeds sacrifices forward. Quote, "By impulse of Savita Deva, I take you with arms of Ashvins, with the hands of Pushan." Unquote. There is a cluster of devas here that have an association with the sun. This is perhaps because of the central role of the visible sun as source of prana that Savita should be called upon to bring energy into play in the ritual. Lord Pushan is generally associated with the rulership over domestic animals, and he receives energy, we are told specifically, from Savita. Although in some mantras he is identified with Savita directly, and some have argued that Lord Pushan is in fact a form of the sun. Thus he represents the material manifestation of the activity of prana, expressed by the Ashvins in their microcosmic form as the breathing cycle, from the source of which is the sun. Pardon me, please. The Yajurveda provides the list of animal sacrifices and rites in which they were done at that time. In the horse sacrifice, a white goat and a rooster were offered to Savita, and in the same rite, a single white goat to Lord Surya. Savita is also invoked in the ritual for the sacrifices to the ancestors or the Pitris. There is another potential link with Lord Vishnu here. In modern times, For Tarpanam, or ancestor offerings, it is Lord Vishnu who is the primary deity invoked. Sacrifices are also mentioned in the Atharva Veda. There is a goat sacrifice to win the worlds, which Surya brightens, although perhaps not specifically to him, and both Lords Surya and Savita receive portions of a sacrificed cow. The knees are dedicated to Dahatar and Savita, while in the same hymn the hide is given to Lord Surya. There may be an allusion to the offering of the hide in a verse in the Rig Veda. Part of the Odana offering, or oblations of boiled rice, is offered explicitly to the feet of Savita. Pardon me. The visible sun and the solar heavenly realm. The visible sun in Vedic cosmology. In Vedic cosmology, the world of phenomenal appearance is conceptualized as a nested set of spheres in one circular structure. Within this sphere, there is a threefold division of the firmament with the earth at the center. The axis around which these spheres rotate to supply motion to the whole system is the zenith, which is identified with Lord Vishnu. To cite one basic example, the seers of the Rig Veda outline this structure as follows, in a quote that we've already seen from another one of the Vedas. Quote, Savita, encompassing them by his magnitude, pervades the three divisions of the firmament, the three worlds, the three brilliant spheres, the threefold earth. Unquote. According to the fourth mandala of the Rig Veda, this view is traced to the, appearing in the fourth mandala of the Rig Veda, traces this view to the earliest section of the Rig Veda, which is identified as the family books. The Skala Sayana labels these zones in the following manner. The three firmaments of those are of VIII, VIII, and Varuna. The three spheres are attributed to Agni, VIII, and Surya. The threefold earth is an open question which may refer to underworld geographies. Pardon me. This brings us to the sun and his pathway, which is the vertical border of the cosmos. This pathway is said to consist of 30 stations of the day and the night which shine with the sun's rays. In the fourth Veda, these become 30 realms over which the sun rules. This pathway of the sun and the moon was made by Lord Varuna, as it is an aspect of the terrestrial Varuna. For this reason, the stations may well be the lunar asterisms or nakshatras which border the human realm. In a hymn to recall the spirit of the dying man, in the Atharva Veda, as we have seen, this mortal realm is ruled by the sun. The primary reason for this being, as stated, that the sun is the source of the prana. The sphere of the mortal realm reaches to the boundary of the horizon, which defines the visible world of appearance from the natural human perspective. Beyond this border is the cosmic ocean. This is the ocean-like firmament of waters and the waters beyond the sun. This cosmic ocean is older than the sphere of the world. The sun interacts with these waters to create its three functions, which are defined by Sayana as rain, heat, and cold. This relationship is described by some sages, quote, "May yonder waters near the sun, or those wherewith the sun is joined, send forth this sacrifice of ours," unquote. This cosmic ocean is called the bride of the sun in his form of Gandharva. The later sages call them mothers and goddesses. The cosmic ocean is often associated with Lord Varuna. The Genesis Dilemma. Living as we do in an era of satellites and many decades after the moon landing, we know with metaphysical certitude that the view of the physical cosmos, as presented by the Vedic sages here, is false. This raises the issue of the Genesis dilemma. In their orthodox forms, the Abrahamic religions are inexorably bound, like Ahab tied to Moby Dick, to the literal readings of their text because of their need for direct revelation. The rise of modern science has created a wide variety of existential challenges for this position, found most particularly in the accounts recorded in Genesis of the origin of man and the nature of the world. If the Vedas are also presenting an archaic cosmology, then the question becomes if they too are to be regarded as flawed and lacking validity. There is a modern trend among many writers on the subject of the Vedas who utilize symbolist reductionism methods to argue that the seers were secretly communicating advanced knowledge of meteorology or astronomy, depending upon the author. This is how they attempt to resolve this alleged dilemma. But the Vedas are not about such a limited knowledge. They are about the Aryan law and, most importantly, self-knowledge. The worldview of the Vedas is one which is based on human perception and psychology, not hard science. The seers were not concerned with facts about the material world, but rather with communicating metaphysical truths. Even if they did think, and it's my own personal view that they did, that there was a crystalline bridge high in the sky upon which the sun traveled as the wheel of a golden chariot, the only path of a sun which is truly important is the one within the microcosm, not the outside world. And that is the main point, and that is what is most important. Further, for religions such as Christianity, if there was no first Adam, there is no original sin, and hence no need for a second Adam, who is Christ. The Vedic religion from which modern Hinduism emerged is not so deeply invested in literal cosmological text. So in reality, it avoids the Genesis dilemma altogether, at least if someone spends any time actively reflecting on the subject. The visible sun, chariot of Lord Surya. Quote, "O Indra, bold one, come, may vigor fill you as Surya fills the mid-air with rays," unquote. In examining the mantras in the Vedas which seem to apply to the visible sun, pardon me, The pattern of distinctions which has been recorded between Lord Surya and Lord Savita is again repeated. In this case, the vast majority of mantras are not applied to Savita, save in 3 verses. It has already been stated that the visible sun was considered the single wheel of the chariot of Lord Surya. Quote, "The animator of men arises, the great rain-shedding banner of Surya rolling on the universal wheel, which the white steeds yoked to his car drag along." Unquote. The sages say that this wheel traverses the sky with the speed of thought. Through the hymn, a variety of other poetic descriptions are given for the beautiful splendors of Surya. In shining, he is said to stretch his arms. Acting through the medium of the visible sun, Lord Surya is said, as mentioned, to give rain and dew with his rays as well as frost. Thunder is also attributed to the sun in 1 verse. The sages of the Atharva Veda saw the sun as the force which cast meteors across the sky. This is striking since they are most often visible at night when the sun is not present, unless this is referring to some specific historical incident. It is the sun which regulates the seasons, and which was a comparatively advanced realization for that era. Along the same line, we also find that the sages were aware that the moon was not luminous in itself, but was receiving light from the sun, as they found solar rays concealed in the moon. Though it should be noted that there could be an esoteric reading of this as well. While the terrestrial form of Lord Indra, the sky, is chiefly seen as the destroyer of atmospheric asuras, the sun also is given a role in this mythic drama played out across the horizon. He too is a slayer of Vitra, who was the rain-arresting storm clouds which are called obstructors of water. In other verses, Lord Indra is said to use the rays of the sun to consume foes. Another Asuric phenomena of the visible sun, which is recorded in the Vedas, is the solar eclipse. On the subject of darkness, when the sun sets, he is said to extinguish his beams. This raises the question if there may be an underworld or hidden form of the sun. One intriguing possibility is that this may be, in fact, be the identity of the Deva Progeny. The reason for this is that the sages state that his home is the center of the earth. Like Lord Surya, he is associated with rain and germination. Thus, Progeny may be a subterranean form of the sun. This argument is further supported from the verses which say that Rohita goes into the womb of the earth, also called his birthplace. Thus, Rohita becomes Progeny and is reborn into Savita as the rising sun. Most Vedic devas are associated with the sky, so this would make him the lone chthonic form of a deva in the Vedic era. Solar totems. Within the hymns, the sun is associated not only with a variety of devas, but of animals as well. These images poetically convey the power and majesty of the sun. One of the most common symbols is that of the bull who shines out through all the sky. It is not surprising that this should be applied to the sun, as the bull is attributed to a number of devas throughout the Vedas. The sun is called the spotted bull. Savita in particular is also portrayed as a bull amid the cows, diffusing light and dew in a sexual image. Birds are often used by the sages as symbols for the sun. In some verses, this is more of a generic description. Quote, "They gaze on you with longing in their spirit, as on a strong-winged bird that mounts skywards. On you with wings of gold, Varuna's envoy, the bird that hastens to the home of Yama." Unquote. The sun is particularly described as a swan, as it was for Rohita, and also an eagle. There is some discussion over the translation here, as some have argued that this is actually a falcon. This would serve as a link to the legend of the origins of Soma, which was brought from the higher spheres into the world by the Gayatri meter in the form of a falcon. It is also said that the eagles live in the sun. This is an interesting illusion which may possess different shades of meaning. On the one hand, since the eagle flies higher than any bird, perhaps it was assumed that they dwelt in the sun, but that is really a very prosaic reading. It may also refer to bird forms of the Devas, but that would make it fairly unique in all of the hymns of the Vedas, since only Soma is described as winged. Another possibility is that those who dwell in the sun are associated with bird forms. The portrayal of the deceased as birds is common in many human cultures. A third meaning may be one linked with the earlier verses from the Yajurveda, in which the sun rays were said to be inhabited by snakes. The eagle and the snakes are opposite. This may refer to different modalities of the activity of the prana flowing from the sun. The heavenly realms in the Vedas. In my earlier investigation of the afterlife in the Rig Veda, I studied many of the verses in the Rig Veda specifically related to the subject of life after death and how this was viewed by the Vedic seers. My primary focus there was to refute the claims of Oldenburg as spokesman for the earlier Indologist, who asserted that the sages of the Vedic era were less developed in these concepts than later Buddhist and Greek thinkers. There I was concerned to prove that the heavenly realms and reincarnation were present in the Rig Vedas. Here I'm going to refine my study of this subject with some additional information which relates specifically to the subject of the sun. While admittedly debatable, since some verses are unclear and leaving aside the Upanishads, as I'm trying to establish in these studies views based strictly on the text of the Samhitas themselves, it appears that there may be three distinct topographies of etheric spheres, two associated with the sun and the moon. In one mantra of the Rig Veda, there is reference to the departed journeying to the moon. Quote, "Sage Agni, the mortal who propitiates you, becomes a moon in heaven." Unquote. In another place, the seers state that Lord Vishnu constructed a spacious dwelling for his worshippers, which in later Puranic literature is identified with Vaikuntha. Lord Indra, however, is also described as the lord of the vast god-frequent Svarga. There has already been some discussion of the possibility that Lord Savita may be a transcendental form of Lord Vishnu. If this is the case, then it would be justified to identify this unnamed space with the solar heavenly realm, which we will now examine. Though, if he is fabricating this for humans who have already lived on the earth and are praising him, we would assume the sun already existed. Restricting ourselves simply to the verses of the Vedas of themselves, there are still many questions which could be raised on this. My suspicion is that this space is associated with the zenith of the sky, or possibly the pole star. The solar heavenly realm. The sun is placed in the highest sphere, which is seen to be above the visible firmament. It is here that the solar heavenly realm is found. While linked with the visible sun, it does not seem that the seers are reducing this to the confines of the orb alone, but rather to the broader geography they visualized it is occupying. This is where light is perpetual and the world where the sun is placed. The visible sun, as the conduit of prana, is a gateway. Also, while certainly not all, as some devas live in the rivers or mountains, for example, this is the realm in which the devas are said to primarily dwell above the sky. These are the universal devas who take part in the functions of Savita, meaning the management of this holographic universe of the phenomenal world of appearance, or Maya. The attainment of this realm is one of the aims of the Vedic sacrificial system. In some hymns, this is presented almost abstractly or in terms of geography alone. Quote, "We have come to the light of heaven, to the light of the heaven we have come. We have united with the light of Surya," unquote. In another hymn, mention is made of 3 generations which went into sunlight. There is also a more personalized presentation of this process. In some hymns, this is described in terms of adoption, where the human becomes a child of the form of the devas they have worshipped. Some sages pray, "May we be among the excellent progeny of Savita and attain his excellent glory." Here, Lord Savita gives immortality. In other verses, a different deva is mentioned. Quote, "We have become the children of Prajapati. Devas, we have gone to heaven. We have become immortal." Unquote. Similar prayers are offered to Lord Indra, although not explicitly as a father figure. It might be surmised these distinctions are indicative of 2 different paths. One is that of a boon from a personal deva, like Savita, Prajapati, Indra. The second is a different process, or they may be referring to different afterlife destinations. This could be seen in the verse which says that those who propitiate Agni in rituals alone go to the moon, while those who employ other methods in conjunction with sacrifice attain the sun. The first indication of the distinction from the idea that Svarga is just a boon from a personal deva is the necessity of specific occult knowledge for immortality. Quote, "They who know the stations of Agni upon the earth, the stations of Vayu that is fabricated from the firmament, and the stations of the sun which is placed in heaven, obtain immortality." Unquote. The seers have poetically expressed this secret in a variety of ways through the verses of the 4 Veda Samhitas. A critical verse to reconstruct this can be found where the sages reference the manner in which their clan ancestors had attained the solar sphere. Quote, "May those rays of the sun by which our forefathers have attained together a heavenly region shine upon us also." Unquote. A key of this process is to be found in the rays of the sun. A general reference has already been made to previous generations who entered sunlight, but this is far more specific in bringing the rays of the sun themselves into the process. This study has touched upon several functions the sages attributed to the rays of the sun for healing. But this is not speaking here of physical regeneration. The rays are pathways because of what they contain, the prana or vital energy of the sun. The sages of the Atharva Veda tell us that the sun is prana and is the source of all of it that flows into the material universe for our local system. The ancient seers attained the solar heavenly realm by using the prana of the sun as a pathway and tracing it back to the source and perhaps beyond. This brings this study to the next form of the sun, the inner yogic sun. The yogic sun in the microcosm. Quote, "Whatever other fires there may be, they are but ramifications, Agni, of you. You, Vaishvanara, a form of Agni, are the navel of men, and support them like a deep-planted column." Unquote. The way to the outer heavenly solar realm of the celestial sun is through the inner sun in the heart of man. The energetic substratum, which is flowing into the material universe to manifest and maintain this system, coming ultimately from the galactic core, is the same energy or prana that is within man. There is no distinction save in modalities and transient forms. This is the yogic Agni. This Agni, which is within the sun, and is the same as animates all living beings because it is, as the sages say, the germ of all creatures. These are the rays of sun which yield ambrosia. Having established the theoretical basis, the next subject to consider is the practical methodology referenced in the text to attain this inner light. Already in the earliest section of the Rig Veda, it is made clear that this is a meditative exploration. We see this exploration of the inner psyche in one verse, for example. By wisdom seated in the heart, the Vashisthas, the students of sage Vashistha, one of the Saptarishis, traversed the hidden thousand-branched world. The heart is the key. This is because we are taught this is where the sun radiates from the core of our own pranic system. Quote, "The wise behold with their mind seated in their heart the sun made manifest by the illusions of the Asura." Here this refers to Indra, which would be the yogic Indra, the mind, the ego. The sages look into the solar orb. The ordainers of solar worship desire the regions of his rays. Unquote. This is seen elsewhere where the solar rays are described as emanating from the navel or center of Indra. Through the illusions generated by the biographical ego, the sages discovered with their meditative techniques the core of the prana within. Thus, while one may attain to the heavenly lunar realm by external actions alone, to reach the heavenly solar realm requires a combination of both external and internal work. On this note, I encourage the viewer to pursue this path to the best of your ability. And on that note, I will end this video. Thank you very much.